Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Village Board meeting. I ask that you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Cassie, could we have roll call, please?
Sure. Trustee Grabowski. Trustee Gergen. Here. Trustee Rhodey.
Here.
Trustee Bell. Here. Trustee Krasovich. Here. Trustee Roberts.
Here.
President Knutson.
Here. Okay, item 2 on tonight's agenda is a public hearings. The first one is a public hearing on ordinance to amend sections 40.221A, 40.229A, 40.268, 40.301, 40.319, and 40.400, 1(2)B of the Village Code pertaining to maximum permitted building height, and to amend section 40.426JI, or J1, pardon me, of the Village Code pertaining to residential use parking. I hereby open up the public hearing. Is there anybody in the room that would like to make a comment as it relates to that? No? Okay, then I will close that one. And item 2B, public hearing on ordinance to end section 40.400.11 of the Village Code pertaining to the maximum percentage of units within a senior housing development developed under the HEO Housing for the Elderly Overlay Zoning District, which may be allocated toward independent living. I hereby open up the public hearing. Is there anybody here that would like to make a comment as it pertains to that hearing? Yes, miss.
Good evening. I'm Pamela Bells, project developer with Senior Housing Partners at Presbyterian
Name and
Homes,
address too.
2823 Hamlin Avenue North in Roseville, Minnesota,
Okay.
55113. I'm here tonight with a couple of others, Carrie Ajak, our Director of Operations in Wisconsin, and Eric Harmon, our architect. We appreciate the opportunity tonight to discuss the item under 2B regarding the amendment to a municipal code in the housing for the elderly, where it has 50% being independent units, matching a 50% being assisted living, memory care, or higher skilled care. We're requesting that consideration be given to change that to be more weighted to the independent living in more of a 75-25 kind of arrangement. And that is because people don't move through the continuum of care in a one-to-one fashion. So not everybody that enters IL goes to an assisted living, a memory care, even a skilled. We find that 36% of our residents skip over all those, and they either spend the rest of their days in the independent apartment or may go to a care center for hospice or really near the time of their homecoming. So it's a pretty hefty proportion that their independent unit is their last move. So there isn't the one-to-one, which is why we're asking for the reduction in assisted living memory care requirement. It just isn't, there isn't the demand for it, and it's not the way people move through the continuum. We do, before we start planning a proposal for a project, do a market study. And this particular market study for Pewaukee showed that there is a demand in the area, the immediate area, for independent units, but there is actually an oversupply of assisted living and memory care currently, and projected through at least 2026 and beyond. So we're seeing already that behavior match the demand, where there isn't the demand as much for the higher levels of care. So again, that's part of what we're reflecting with this request. Our existing campus does have a waiting list for independent, which is just another factor pointing towards the need for more independent living. And we have found in our studies that we do that most of the residents that flock to a campus are from that area. We have found that the majority of people at Kirkland Crossing come from an 8-mile area, with 25% coming from 2 miles around, another 40% from 4 miles around. And there is about 18% across our system that come from out of state. And we call that shadow migration. I want to be close to my grandkids. I want to be close to my adult children. So they move from Florida or wherever they're at to a campus near where their children live. So that accounts for about 20%. So the campuses really do serve the immediate area and the immediate community. So the demand study that we've found the results for being really weighted towards independent living fit what would serve this community well. One thing that we heard moving through the previous discussions was that there was a desire to have this all be under one roof, say, so all be under the Presbyterian Homes Kirkland Crossing entity and be part of the same campus. And that's something that we heard from the Planning Commission and from the board. And so we have made those adjustments, and that if this goes forward and we move to a CUG, you'd be seeing that all combined as one campus. So I just wanted to express that we heard you and we've made those changes. We really feel strongly that this amendment to the ordinance would fit the market and the way people move through it. We are here tonight for questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that on this particular topic? Okay, then I will close the public hearing for that particular one. Item 3 is approval of the regular village board meeting dated August 1st, 2023. I hope everyone's had a chance to look them over as they are presented. Are there any questions, comments, corrections as the way they are presented this evening? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve as written.
Second, Krasovich.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion minutes are hereby adopted. Item 4 is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to share their opinions with board members on any topic they choose. However, due to Wisconsin open meeting laws, the board is not able to answer questions or respond to your comments. All comments should be directed to the board. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Speakers are asked to please use the podium and state your name and address for the record. Is there anybody here that would like to make a comment on anything at all? Packers, Brewers, anything otherwise? Nothing? No? Okay, then we're going to keep moving right on. Item 5A, ordinances. Possible action on ordinance number 2013-14, ordinance 2023-14, pardon me. Ordinance to amend sections 40.221A, 40.229A, 40.26A, 8, 40.301, 40.319, and 40.400, 1, 2B of the village code pertaining to maximum building height, and to amend section 40.426J1 of the village code permitting to residential parking regulations. Scott or Mary? Mary, would you like to take this, please?
Sure. Just to kind of give the board a little bit of background on this, the Planning Commission months ago already acknowledged the fact that in our downtown, our B2 downtown business district, we allow multifamily use through conditional use permit, also requiring village board approval in the event that happens. But unlike the R6 Plex residential zoning district and the RM multifamily residential zoning district, where specific density, maximum density factors are included in the districts themselves, 6 duplex units maximum per acre in Plex, 12 multifamily units maximum per acre in RM. Unlike those, in the B2 district, we really hadn't established any sort of a threshold as to what the Planning Commission and the Village Board would be thinking in terms of maximum permitted density in the case of a multifamily use. So to that end, we began the discussion, the Planning Commission began that discussion, thinking in terms of density, but then looked outside of our borders to area communities that have had some very successful multifamily downtown type development occur in the very recent past. So I talked with their planners, examined their ordinances, and really came to the conclusion based on their experiences that in the downtown environment, really what you're not trying to do necessarily is preserve a lot of open space. You're really trying to make maximum use of what is usually a very finite land resource in the downtown area. So still in all, we don't want to have an anything goes type density limit. And what we learned is that by limiting, for instance, building height maximum, by establishing minimum parking requirements to be provided on site in support of the multifamily use, and also by, let's see, we had parking, maximum height, and I guess that was it. Yeah, those were the two kind of threshold factors that we were told if you zero in on those, the project essentially finds its own balance. If you can only go this tall, and if you must provide this much parking on site, there's only so much you can build out in a downtown sized parcel, okay? So that being said, what the commission did is examined the existing parking regulations for residential uses and concluded with respect to multifamily dwellings in the B2 downtown district that we would create a set of requirements for that unto itself. And that those requirements would be for one-bedroom apartments, you must provide at least one enclosed parking space per unit. That you have two-bedroom and three-bedroom units would be required to provide two enclosed parking spaces per unit. And then guest parking requirements would be 0.25 stalls per unit, period, okay? So those would be an absolute, right? Except to the extent that the village does say in its parking regulations that these requirements can be waived if it's deemed appropriate and not adverse to the surrounding environment, based on a planning commission evaluation and ultimately a village board consent to that. So those would become now the parking requirements for downtown type multifamily development. Then with respect to structure height, actually in the B2 district, we currently have 42 feet as our building height. And the Planning Commission looked at this more globally and said, what is our building height threshold throughout all of our B districts in the village? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And is there any reason that we're not being consistent? And what is it that we're hoping to achieve with our building height limits? And generally, the consensus was that we're hoping to achieve maximum 3-story buildings, and we're hoping to cap those at 45 feet, understanding that that would allow 3 stories and a gabled roof feature in most cases, okay? So that became the number across the board for B2, B4, B5, R6, in the B4 Business Park, 55 feet. In the B5 Light Industrial District, 55 feet. In the Housing for Elderly District, we had already allowed not to exceed 4 stories or 52 feet. We now go on to say up to 55 feet if the building design incorporates a gabled roof feature. And then back to multifamily, up to 45 feet if the building design incorporates a gabled roof line. So that became sort of the target number in order to get the maximum height being 3 stories generally, and encouraging the use of a gabled roof feature. So those are the changes specifically that you're being asked to consider tonight as a part of this ordinance. If there are questions for me or questions for Trustee Roberts, who is also our Planning Commissioner representative from the board, about the origin of this analysis and why we looked at it to begin with, or how we came to these conclusions, we're happy to help.
Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Bob?
Quick question in regard to the parking. Notice we specify it has to be enclosed parking. So surface, lot, in back of the building, can't do that unless you get the planning commission to say, okay.
You can do it. Yes, you absolutely can do that. You must provide at least 0.25 parking stalls per unit in terms of guest spaces. So presumably those would be unenclosed spaces. Anything beyond that, really thinking about treating it just like we treat, for the most part, our business districts. We have a very limited on-site requirement now in the downtown district, and the balance is thought to be found by moving out into the public lots and public spaces on street.
Yes.
Help me to understand why, for the multifamily dwellings that aren't in the B2 district, for 1 bedroom, it's 1.75 enclosed spaces per unit, but in the downtown district, it's just 1.
Sure. There was a lot of discussion on that point, and essentially I think the commission's conclusion was that the character type of most downtown redevelopment or infill type multifamily residential developments tend to attract people who have a higher level of interest in using mass transportation. That tends to be more available in the downtown environments. They tend to be more inclined to, and we didn't really come or go fetch any empirical data to support this, but the feeling of the commission was people that are willing to live in this very urban downtown environment would be more inclined to use Uber as needed to make trips here and there, that the home's household size might be smaller, requiring fewer vehicles.
So sum it up with people who want to live downtown have less stuff.
Well, you got to remember too, this is part of when we're setting standards for a developer to come in. So if it's a building that's a mix of 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, they have to allot for, based on the number of each, to come up with a number of total parking units. And so really it's not that there's going to be 1 spot for that 1 bedroom. It's going to be how they want to handle it. This whole thing came out of really our strategic planning when we were talking about addressing ordinances proactively, and knowing that with the comprehensive land use plan, how the downtown B2 district has been identified as a primary for redevelopment, knowing that we have the Capstone project, trying to help create a vision for that. We just wanted to be out in front of this. And Mary did an incredible job of doing a lot of research in other communities. And I don't know, how much time have we spent on this? Close to a year?
Many months.
And so really it's to try and look at the fact that it's a downtown, more of an urban environment than apartments that are out further. And so really that's how we end up coming up with those kinds of numbers to do that. And we actually did have, I don't remember exactly when that was, maybe a couple years ago, where we actually had someone come in on a consultative basis
wanting to put an apartment complex downtown, 200 units, I think it was 200 units or no parking. And it's like, well, where will people that live there park? Well, they'll find a spot. It's like, no, but we had nothing to defend it. And again, when you look at things like Act 67 and 68, where if we don't define it, then we have to defend against it, and that's painful. So again, we just want to be out in front of it and set a standard. If we find, as we're talking to developers, that we're a little off, okay, just like we're dealing with one of the other topics today, is we'll address it. But as a starting point, at least we're in a much better position today than we were before, where we had no definition to how we want to do that. So that's kind of the rationale of that.
Jim?
Okay,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, I wasn't done. Yeah, that sounds fine. I don't necessarily think that our downtown is going to have a lot of people using public transportation, but I think it's irrelevant. I just thought, 1.75 seemed a little excessive for the other units if we're only requiring one for downtown. But then the other thing is, just with that B5, I think there's a typo there, perhaps. Like it doesn't need the 0 if you're adding the 5 onto it, just with the strike through. That's all.
I think the second 5, the red 5, appears to be struck out, but it's not. The 5 is inserted, the 0 is deleted. It used to be
Okay.
50 feet, now it's 55.
Great. Okay.
The only thing I'll say is that I appreciate you being proactive on the building height one. I know that's been up in front of us since Beachscape, the nursing home center on 164. If we're trying to follow this architectural guidelines or guidance within the village that typically requires gabled roofs or shingled roofs and is not very friendly towards the flat roofs or modern looks, in order to get that full 3 stories, the 42 feet or some of the other heights were very restrictive on development. So I appreciate you taking a look at that and increasing it, because it still accomplishes what we want in maxing 3 stories, but it allows for the flexibility on the architecture. So.
And the B2 does have a very unique and distinct architectural
Correct.
style guideline compared to the rest of the village. So we want to maintain that and allow for that.
That was a very big hurdle for the Beachscape developer to get around in order to get the height, or to get it under that requirement with our requirements. So thank you for addressing that.
Any other questions? If not, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the changes presented for ordinance 2023-14.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ordinance number 2023-14 is hereby adopted. Possible action on ordinance number 2023-15, ordinance to amend section 40.411 of the village code pertaining to maximum percentage of units within a senior housing development developed under the HEO Housing for Elderly Overlay Zoning District, which may be allocated toward independent living. Mary?
Yep. So again, just to clarify that this modification to the Elderly Housing Overlay District with respect to percent of units that can be independent was initiated by an applicant, by request of an applicant, but it is not intended to address a particular project. It applies throughout the community to anyone who currently has the Elderly Housing Overlay zoning or applies for it in the future. Okay, so this isn't a unique or a singular focus, this change that we're talking about. And really, it's as simple as this. At the time that the Planning Commission drafted and created this overlay, I think in coming to a decision about a maximum number of independent units as compared to a minimum required number of assisted type units, it wasn't that we had reached some conclusion that it was going to be a one-to-one flow that people were going to go directly out of their independent into their assisted, that kind of thing. It was more about comprehensively, what is the impact on services, for instance, when you think about an independent living unit, somebody 55 and older living independently, versus somebody 55 and older living in assisted levels of care. So that's the basis on which we initially arrived at the overlay district as it's written today. We always want to be cognizant of whether our regulations are really staying contemporary with the market conditions that are out there. And this particular applicant who made this request has brought us some market information to suggest that we might not be contemporary with the market conditions out there. And in fact, there is less demand than a few years ago for the assisted types of living opportunity versus the independent types of living opportunity for people 55 and up. And so, bearing all of that in mind, the commission really kind of labored on this topic and tried to find the right fit, and I think concluded that 75% versus 25% with 25% minimum assisted type housing would be a reasonable fit, owing to what we learned about the market as it sits today. And maybe 10 years from now, we'll be looking at it again, or 5 years, or whenever that might come up. But for now, this is what the commission felt very comfortable with. So the extent of change is very modest. It would simply take the existing paragraph about the maximum number of units that can be independent. It would exclude the language that says independent living units will be permitted only as a subordinate use and not to exceed 50%. And it says independent living units shall be permitted within a development project period, and they will not exceed 75% of the total units. So that's the change. Again, Trustee Roberts has been a part of all those meetings with the commission. If he or I can answer questions, we're happy to.
Any questions? Yes, Bob?
Yeah, just a question in regard to it. Again, it's a trend that we see now. Would the planning commission had the ability to just do a one-off for this development and make that change without changing the ordinance?
No, I don't.
No.
I don't believe you can do that
Okay.
unless you were working in a different zoning environment, such as a planned unit development, for instance, where the possibility for that might exist. But even in that circumstance, if you're saying, yes, this is a viable solution on this property, you're going to have to really understand and reveal why it's not also a viable solution for another property. So you would have to have some very clear evidence about why it's okay here, but it's not there.
We went through actually a number of different iterations on what the language change could look like. I was the burr in the saddle because, again, looking back over the past number of years is when we've made changes, especially a one-off, we always end up regretting it because something else comes up. We go, oh, now we have to allow it, and we don't like that one. So we went around and around quite a bit on it. The other part of it is when we first started building this overlay district ordinance, when we moved it from the institutional areas, which were surrounded by neighborhoods, out to the business area, all that consideration, it was based on the current model, which is that continuum of care. And so we wanted to support that. However, at that time, if we all remember back, a number of years ago, we had more concern about adding more rental properties than we did about the impact on fire and rescue. 4 years later, that's a bit flipped. So this actually, I think, helps address some of that because by raising it, if it attracts more people who are still in a state where they can be independent, hopefully that reflects will be less impact on fire and rescue than if we increase the number of assisted living. We know from a business perspective, like in Kirkland's case, that just staffing, trying to get staffing on a more intense level is very challenging. So by doing this, we saw that it benefited both sides. And by expanding the existing campus, all the pieces that are in place today stay in place. The key thing is we wanted to keep it within the framework of the existing ordinance that we spent 1.5 years on, because what we didn't want to do is have those unintended consequences by trying to redo everything. And so this is very simple, and it gives us that flexibility to give some leeway based on an application that could come in.
Any other questions or comments? I'll look for a motion then.
I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 2023-15 in regard to the senior housing overlay.
And Grabowski.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ordinance 2023-15 is hereby adopted. Item 6, resolution, we have none. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you very much.
Since we have people here, I'd like to skip the strategic plan. I know it won't be long, but we'll come back to it. Discussion and possible action on award of bid for Kiwanis Village Park Sanitary Sewer Lateral Replacement Project. Who wants to take it? Dan or Tim or Scott?
I can, Tim and worked with Dan on the design aspect, so I can let Tim deal with that aspect of it, and then I can come back and discuss the information regarding the financing, which the background and framework of that's already in the staff report.
Okay, so this particular sanitary sewer is at the Kiwanis Park. The system we have now is we have a couple of restrooms at the pavilion. It actually flows to a manhole that's in the midst of some grass area, and then it flows east towards Caldwell Street. And so we went out there, we did a little bit of survey work to determine the flow. We knew that there was some backups in that pipe, and there's a substantial amount of maintenance that's been happening at the pipe just to keep it clean and keep it flowing, which has been very difficult. And we found out that pipe is relatively flat. So in about 320 feet, it drops about 4 inches, which is not much at all. Let's just put it that way. So we want to create a solution. We couldn't just replace the pipe. That wouldn't have gotten us a whole lot more slope, wouldn't have met minimum slopes that are needed for laterals. And so the solution was to put in a grinder pump, a little lift station, kind of a small one that you would have like at your home if you're in a rural area, that would have a grinder pump, and then we would have a small force main, a 2-inch force main that would then take it to a manhole that's just west of Caldwell Street, dump it into the manhole, which would be connected to the existing lateral that would take it to into Caldwell Street. And so part of that work is going to be to do some plumbing work that's right adjacent to the bathroom entrance. Get it to the lift station, which will be outside the paved areas there, a little bit to the east of the pavilion, and then from there it would be pumped. So there will be work kind of in that area there and have to be restored. Also, the little grinder pump needs electrical, so there's some work that has to do with the electrical work to get it connected, to get electricity, as well as to get it to a breaker and things like that. So we went out for bids for that. We had 5 contractors that took out plans. We received 2 bids. Mid-City Corporation out of Butler was $132,150. The IHC Construction Company, they're out of I think it's Itasca, Illinois, and they were at $153,100 on that. We didn't anticipate that it would be that high. I talked to Scott a little bit about, is this even feasible, or do we rebid it? Some of the discussion is if we rebid it, next year, who knows where the pricing will be, or we just don't know if the contractors are too busy or what. I mean, I did talk to some contractors. I thought I would have more bidders because I was calling to ask them about that. And I had some interest, but they decided either they didn't want to do it or they were too busy. So that's where we're at right now.
And as the board's aware, we just, Kayla, one of the last several meetings went over our different fund balances, and board members that we have are, any fund balance of the general fund in excess of 40% of operating expenses is set aside for what we have termed our infrastructure fund, for use for unanticipated capital items or to do projects on a cash basis instead of taking out debt to lessen our debt burden. So we do have 1.2 million at the start of this year. With the aerial bucket truck, we've kind of allocated $300,000 for that purchase. The truck's not anticipated to be delivered until 1/1 of '25, so over a year. So even subtracting that money out, there's $778,000 in that infrastructure fund if the board is interested in moving forward on this project. In the alternate, we can look at bidding it out over the winter months for a spring project. As Tim has indicated, there's no guarantee. The bids are going to be less, they might be more. We can continue as we have been doing, which is trying to get a sewer jetter out there over on a somewhat regular basis during the high use time to manually jet it out. It's not taking care of the problem on a long-term basis, but it is. Do nothing is a solution. So there are funds there if the board wants to move forward with it, with our infrastructure funds, or we can look at bidding it out. Again, I guess we're looking for any questions you have and what direction you want to move.
Tim, on both bids, the 132 and the 150 something, when thinking about if we were to delay, obviously they came back higher than what we anticipated. Is it equipment, or are they padded with man hours? Is it more labor intensive than what we originally thought?
The grinder pump himself, the difference between the two companies was $10,000. So, and
What I'm getting at is if it is equipment based, then chances are it's not going to come in less later.
right, that's what I'm just saying, that they were pretty close, equipment wise was about, I think, Mid-City was 61 and the other company was 71, or the other way around, something like that.
And was that higher than what you anticipated it being?
Yes,
Okay.
it was.
So
But
it's more on the pump side of it opposed to.
yeah, but I mean, still, that was not that's a large, it's a big chunk. But even if that goes down by $10,000 or so, then the total cost is still going to be somewhere over 100,000 on that.
Right.
So I don't think it was. I mean, unfortunately, with bidding, you don't know where the contractors are putting in their labor costs, to different elements of that. We don't have that broken out specifically.
Well, yeah, I was just figuring if you were thinking that the pump was going to be 50 grand and it came in at 50 grand, but the total bid came back at 132, then it's like, okay, maybe there's a chance if they're not busy, they would lower that bid. But if you're like, I thought the pump was going to be 25,000 and it came back at 71,000,
Right. Yeah.
that's not coming down.
No. I mean, I hate to say it, we're just learning, I shouldn't say just learning, but I mean, we're knowing that contractors' prices are just skyrocketing these days, so can't even, it's hard to make estimates because you just don't know. And they're all busy. They're all, like everybody else, short-staffed and busy, and of course, then that raises the prices.
Any other questions or comments, Bob?
It's pretty consistent. I think every bidding process that we've gone through, whether it's been Park and Rec, whether it's been what you've done, I think the prices that Dan has come up with equipment, everything's being blown out of the water. Yeah. And for us to think that it's going to come down next year, we're dreaming. I think. We could Band-Aid this longer, but it's one of those things. We really need to fix this, get it done. If we accept this, it's done this fall.
Yeah, absolutely,
correct?
yes.
And the park is ready to go next year. And it's a problem taken care of that we don't have to face for many years to come.
We did ask Jack about that, and he said get it fixed, pretty much. I think he's kind of tired of doing the maintenance on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would suggest it's a pretty significant drain on our resources right now because we have to get teams over there to do this Band-Aid fix. I also think it has a negative impact on our ability to provide services at that park, which we try to do all summer long with events and with childcare. So as much as I hate to spend the money, I think we need to spend the money.
I'll make a motion to award the bid of the sanitary sewer lateral replacement to Mid-City Corporation for $132,150.
Second, Rhodey.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further questions or comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is hereby carried. Discussion and direction regarding request from Matter Development to share steel casting pipe for water main pipe and sanitary sewer lateral pipe. I think, who's gonna take this one again?
I'll start.
Yeah, I was saying, you want to start and then I'll hop in.
Pass it to him.
Well, yeah, I mean, he can give a discussion, a little presentation of how we got where we got.
Right, that? Okay.
Good evening. Mark Seidel, Pinnacle Engineering Group, 20725 Watertown Road, Brookfield.
That thing is, yeah.
I think we're gonna have to do this, and I might just have to, what if I just do this instead? So I'll just stand up. So I'm hoping everyone here is aware of the project, I think we called it Pewaukee Senior Living at the time, called the Westerly at Swan Road and Highway 164. So as part of the development plans that came before you that got approved, the sewer and water is being connected from the west side of Highway 164 in that Walmart parking lot where there's the public utility connections. So as part of the development plans, we are bringing it underneath Highway 164 via a jack and bore. So a big steel casing pipe goes in underneath the ground, and then your utilities go inside that casing pipe. So, you know, as of about a month ago, we were in construction doing that, and we made about 30 feet of progress the first day. It was going well. And then we hit big boulders, and we hit big boulders and rock, and soon enough, the auger machine stopped working because of this. So for the next, call it 100, 130 feet, they have been mining by hand. So you can imagine this is a 36-inch steel casing pipe with people, poor guys, you know, I say, they're in that casing pipe mining by hand and kind of digging out that casing pipe since now the auger won't work. So as of today, we have one steel casing pipe in the ground, being the sanitary sewer, and we are working with staff to try to understand what is a alternative solution to doing a second casing pipe as our plans indicated. Right now, it's not only a schedule, issue, it's a cost issue, and I don't want to be those people down in that hole again, digging underneath the road. So I think maybe that's kind of the brief scenario where we're at today.
You want to share, though, the DNR requirements, why there would be two separate lines and that they would be spaced?
Sure. So as part of the original development plans, there was a public water main and a private sewer lateral. So the DNR requirements state that you need to have certain separation distance, and to dumb it down, you need to have two separate casing pipes in an ideal world. So as part of the design plans, we had two separate casing pipes, call them 10 to 12 feet apart, something like that. And we would be running them separately. Now, again, going and knowing what we have now, we're trying to understand an alternative to go with one casing pipe while still maintaining DNR codes and making it acceptable to everybody.
Thank you.
So the request by them is to go with the single casing pipe as it already exists, but put both the public water main and the private sanitary lateral in the same pipe instead of separated. It sounds like the DNR would accept that. So the problems come, I think, from the village's perspective of perpetual maintenance of that. We talked here previously, and I kind of made a big deal about water mains being in easements and being belonging to the water utility. That's in 81168 of Administrative Code. In this case, we kind of thought about various scenarios there. And in order to sort of make it simple, I think an acceptable scenario would be to do exactly what I said that we shouldn't do, which is to make the water main and the casing pipe and the sanitary lateral all private, their responsibility from the Walmart property to the building. However, how we could manage what happens with the water itself is that on the west side of the highway, Walmart property in that easement, we could put a vault in there. We could have it metered where the water leaves the municipal water main. We could meter it there. We could have a backflow preventer to ensure that we couldn't have any cross contamination. We'd have a meter there where it leaves the municipal side, and then there would also be another meter for the building itself. So that we'd have redundancy there in the meter. We wouldn't have issues like we had at the other property where we knew that people were stealing water from a private hydrant, that sort of thing. So, as a concept at this point, I think it's up to Pinnacle to sort of figure out the details on whether it's achievable or not. There's some space limitations with the easement, and some other details to figure out there, but I mean, that's kind of the gist of where it's at right now, which again sort of contradicts what we had talked about earlier as far as ensuring that water main was public and was to be publicly maintained. And it's all driven by the technical difficulties with getting Jack and Force under the highway.
Was it supposed to maintain as a public water main for fire over there, or why were we trying to maintain that as public?
So state code, it doesn't mandate it, but it recommends that all municipal water main belongs to the water utility. Because that way the water utility controls its use and its forever maintenance. You could, without that, you could potentially have a situation where you have a private water main and it breaks and the owner just lets it flow for days, weeks, months, and doesn't care because it's not being metered.
Well, I suppose, why were we trying to make it a main going across there opposed to just having them doing a lateral?
Yeah, I can address that. Is when we did the review, they were required to go to the fire department to get their input on the location of the main as well as of any hydrants, things like that. And so the fire department required hydrants on that, around the building. Right. So I think there's at least 2 around the building and some connections at the building that they have to have. And so that was kind of dictated by the fire department. So if it was strictly just a lateral from one side to the other to the building, I think we would have just said, yeah, that's just a lateral. But with the additional hydrants were really, those would be public. Obviously, they want to use those. In this scenario, we would probably want to mark those as just so they note that those are private hydrants.
Or is it something where if you're saying you put a vault and a meter there, basically it's a deduct meter on their own then you could do, to where you could leave those hydrants as public?
No.
I'm just. Well, I'm just saying, what's the point of redundancy then?
So we dealt
if everything's gonna be theirs, well, it doesn't matter, everything's theirs, so it's up to them to determine it.
Well, the only redundancy you'd have is you'd be able to differentiate between what gets used overall and what's getting used in the building.
But it's.
In the end, well, the difference could be the difference between, well, it would be like a deal.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But, you know, then you wouldn't need to have the concern that they're gonna crack a hydrant open to, you know, do some irrigating or something with it. You know, and you'd be able to know what happened to the water. It would be metered water, as opposed to, you know, a private hydrant at the end of behind a building somewhere where you have no idea what's happening to it. It's unmetered. Right. So
essentially, we just need it metered at the beginning,
Right.
and we technically don't need a meter in the building.
Correct.
If it's metered, then we don't really care.
I think technically, I'm not a plumber, I don't know much about plumbing code, but I think that you need to have, in the building, you're gonna need to have cross-connection control and those other things, which I think implicitly mean you would have a meter there, I think. I'm not a plumber either.
I'm a similar player, I'm sorry.
I think one other thing to think about as this goes forward is that, you know, one of my big issues I know Dan's worried about is, you should be worried about, is contamination of potable water. I mean, that's what water utilities are most worried about. Is, I mean, we get any kind of contamination, you get a boil order, there's just a lot. I mean, we don't want a Flint, Michigan, and we're not going to have it. But I mean, that was my concern going into this, with this, you know, water main in a casing pipe. I'll just say a public water main in a casing pipe and a private sewer. If it got contaminated, it would be all on us. With what we're proposing or talking about doing is, once it leaves that vault, that's private. So if it gets contaminated, and then they don't call Dan or the village, they call whoever they have as their system operator for their water main system, a plumber, whatever they have to call.
I'm not crazy about them sharing one pipe, just because obviously there's a reason for separation. And more, I guess technically I also want water above sewer, but
No. You do want that, if anything.
that's what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, okay.
If it's my vote or my opinion on it is basically privatizing the whole thing, metering it right at the start of it, and basically having it be able to be valved off right there. And everything out there is theirs. They want to crack a hydrant, they want to flush the toilet 800 times, that's on them, but that's theirs to own and maintain. Because that could be a mess if we get, pun intended, I guess, if we have a leak under 164 there.
Bob?
Yeah, I assume there's some additional costs when you're talking about a vault and another meter. Is that all going to be the developer's responsibility? Okay.
We're saving them from doing hand digging of a 180-foot long casing pipe.
Okay.
There's a cost savings.
They're actually going to be better off by doing this than doing the casing pipe.
Okay.
You know by how much you're going to?
A lot of money.
Okay. There was also some information in regard to filling the casing with sand. Is that going to be required, or?
In my mind, that would be up to, it's their casing now, their system, so
Okay.
it would be up to them.
Okay.
You know, if it would have been ours, we would have had that. I would have wanted that.
Okay. So everything we're hearing, both of you feel comfortable with this recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a little bit of a hybrid. So part of administrative code with water mains, and that's what goes on up at WCTC, is that what code says is when you have two connection points, you put in these vaults with a meter and a backflow preventer. So we have two of those up at WCTC because their entire internal water main network is private. So that's what goes on there. That's what the code says for this. So that idea was kind of this, except it's a one-way deal. So these kind of setups are not that, well, they're unusual, but I guess they're not uncommon.
They're not.
Yeah.
They actually get permitted through what the Department of Safety and Professional Services, DSPS, not DNR necessarily. DNR will look at it, but they won't really be the ones that approve it. Public mains, they get approved by the DNR. So it's just a different state agency that actually does the actual.
So sorry, the DNR won't bless this plan. Who will bless this plan?
It's called Department of Safety and Professional Services. It's called
Okay, and it's the
DSPS.
private
That's like
version of the
That's like
DNR.
the plumbing, the state plumbing code, if you want to.
DSPS is a state agency.
A state agency that manages private.
They deal with
Properties.
building permits, plumbing permits, supervision of all of that, which is why they're dealing with this situation as
Gotcha.
opposed to DNR.
Because what I'm looking for is a state level agency that has far more stringent requirements than we're even aware of to weigh in and say, yeah, this looks fine. I mean, we
No,
want.
the DSPS they allow it, and they've allowed it in a lot of different places, a lot of developments. I mean, to a certain degree, WCTC is the same situation. The only difference with WCTC is there's 2 connection points, so you got water flowing through it, village water flowing through it. So right, it's all open valve, right?
Well,
So-
yeah, but it can only come in one way. It can't force its way, it
Oh, it
can't
can't-
come in one side and force
Oh,
its
it
way on
can't,
the other
okay.
side.
I don't know the
So
system
that's what
of
the
that.
backflow preventers
Okay.
do.
So anyway, so the DNR would only approve the public side, but we won't have a public side. But they said we want to at least see what the plan is.
Heather?
So, Dan, WCTC has 2 backflow preventers,
Yes,
and this project would only have 1.
correct.
But we could require it to have 2.
We can't, because the water mains out there wouldn't allow that. Our water mains are on the west side of 164th, the water mains that are on Swan Road belong to the city. So that they're 2 separate utilities there.
So if the backflow device fails, then we could have bad stuff in the village water. I'm very uncomfortable
You
with
say that
that.
with any backflow preventer. There's
Well, I
backflow preventers in buildings and everywhere, and they're required to be tested.
And I can comment on that too, because with our new meter software, the new AMI meters, that we get readings back every 4 hours, and I can drill down to 15-minute increments, and that's how I found the backflow issues that were at the middle school and high school, and it gives me negative readings. And so our system alerts us of that, and then that's how we would get in contact to let them know that there's backflow issues.
And when
We
there
usually
are,
know about that within about 24 hours.
and when there are backflow issues, that means that what can get into the water.
Yeah, that's at any
So,
property, I mean.
yeah, what would be most likely, it wouldn't be wastewater or anything like that, it would be something like, what would be an example? Like you hooked up your ortho fertilizer sprayer, your pressure springer, and if you had some sort of low pressure situation, you could potentially suck that backwards into a garden hose and it could get into your system. It's pretty unlikely, but those are the sorts of things that you do cross connection.
But it wouldn't,
inspections on.
it wouldn't be sewage because that would be going through a different pipe, so.
Right, completely separate. Unless, of course, you had something where somebody did some sort of illegal connection, I don't know what that would be. I mean, nothing is.
Let's stop hypotheticals.
Let's not do that. Nothing
Yeah,
is
let's-
impossible, but again, it's extremely unlikely.
These backflow preventers, and they're large, they're just an 8-inch pipe. They're actually all of them.
Yeah.
Anybody that has a private system does this, has the system, as it goes in there.
Yes,
I guess for the plan commission members, that when this came through, I can't remember if I was there or not, are there any other parcels beyond this one? in
This is
village?
the appendix.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the,
I'm just
there's,
making
it
sure-
doesn't loop into anything.
I'm just making
further.
sure that we're not gonna handcuff ourselves on a future development. 'cause
No, there's
it's not-
nothing else there. It's all city
Yeah.
owned there, so it's
Okay.
closed. Mark, making this change, does this impact the development agreement?
Well, they still, if you give them the blessing to say that in concept you agree with this, they have to do some detailed, I assume, analysis and what the construction would need to look like. Do they have enough room? Is there more easement space that has to be acquired? And yes, there could be a change to the development agreement, but let's, cross that bridge when we see what they actually come up with a design that Dan and Tim can sign off on.
Okay.
I make a motion?
Well, it's just up for direction at this
Just
point,
for
so.
direction. Is there anybody else that has any comment or questions? So if I understand, it's just to kind of put this together. You got a big box on one side, a big huge pipe comes into it, gets filled with sand, you got a meter for the water, one water pipe, one sewer pipe going through the big pipe that goes to the other side, correct?
Pretty much it.
And
There's a number of, there's in that vault, whether it's a manhole or a retaining vault, there's various valves and check valves in that system, so I don't want to get into the details, but
so you can't really fill it with sand.
we don't fill that with sand. When we were talking about filling with sand, that would have been the casing pipe across the pipe, underneath the pipe.
If it was public.
We would have put that, because you got a sewer pipe down below and a water pipe up above, and they have spacers. And so some communities leave it with no filler. But if we would have went in that direction, I would have said, well, we got two different pipes. We might want to put sand in so they don't move around, or it was just the next level of safety.
And if it's privately owned, both sides, once it leaves the box, it's all private.
That's how we're gonna look at it.
Okay,
Once it leaves,
and
would it be at the meter?
Yeah. Oh,
At
yeah.
the meter.
The meter after.
We'll have to figure that out a little bit as to where the meter needs to be. Usually the meters, yeah, we'll work that out.
so anything that this system, any issues or problems that this system would cause to our sewer and water, they would be on the hook for.
We would own the vaults and what's in them.
Right,
After that, all theirs.
but if there was a break-in, something came back and let's damage something in our, like the equipment that's in the
That
vault,
would be prevented at the vault. So anything that happens after it leaves those vaults and starts going under the highway, all theirs.
but if it comes back to the vault, that's their problem too.
Well, the only thing that would happen at the vault is, let's just say the water came back.
That's what I'm
This
saying.
valve would, there's a valve, it's kind of, it flips up, stops the water from coming back. That water is stopped, the whole system is stopped. We're not getting any contaminated water in our system. It just stops the water from coming back into our system to intermix.
So if one of the pipes burst in this container, there's a valve that's gonna shut off?
Inside the vault, you're saying?
No, not inside the vault, in the pipe,
Had breaking it.
in the pipe
Yes, you're
itself,
correct.
in the big casing,
Under the
Yeah.
road.
So
Under the
yes, you're
street.
correct. If that pipe broke under the highway, the water's coming out somewhere. So you're right, could the water potentially come backwards and end up in the vault? It could.
But not necessarily in our.
Correct.
In our system.
It comes
Our
back.
system is contained.
Yes, it come back, but it'd be exposed water. It wouldn't go into the water main network.
okay. My biggest concern is if something would happen, they get contaminated water, they don't know it, people get sick, whose responsibility is that then? It's theirs.
Yes.
That's,
The village is held harmless.
Jeff?
Yes.
There are innumerable different scenarios that lawyers will spend years arguing about, so I
Yeah.
really wouldn't even go there.
Okay,
I mean, the reality is here, does the village want to have to spend, if there's a main break, to excavate through all of the stone that this gentleman told us that they're now doing by hand to repair the public main? I suspect you do not. So, you know, if for no other reason than cost effectiveness in a worst-case scenario, making this their issue is what I think we're all recommending that you do.
Okay.
And if there's any of these other scenarios that you're talking about, you know, you'd have to look at what it is, what caused it, and, you know, is this something on their main that precipitated it, or is there some issue on our side? You know, those are all questions you'd have to analyze when that scenario would arise.
Case by case.
There's beauty in the simplicity of privatizing the whole thing.
Yes.
So what are you looking for? I mean, it sounds like,
Sensing there's direction of the board to move forward on
I'm in agreement with that.
moving forward with privatizing and coming back to the board with any necessary amendments to the development agreement.
And Dan, someone had contacted, or Tim had contacted DNR regarding making this private, this main private, or no?
I made contact with the DNR and told them that we were considering that.
All right, so
I
did
got no
anybody on their
response.
end raise an objection to going in that way, even though there's language in 811 that says to the contrary?
It says they recommend. Doesn't say they recommend.
Understood, but the point is that nobody at DNR raised an objection to it after having been informed that is the way we're looking at going.
Right.
Thank you.
okay. Thank you, Dan. Tim? Sir?
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna go to discussion and direction on conceptual village hall staffing change. I guess Kathy and Kayla are here to go over these.
We are. So just to summarize, Vicki is planning on retiring, which kind of brings this issue up. And we started talking about how we need to, you know, how we could restructure and all that. And it was kind of evident that we need more hours from somebody. So we kind of looked at the total of positions, and we thought that our office would, it'd be advantageous, I guess, if we could split the duties for the deputies, especially during times like elections or utility billing audit licensing seasons. It kind of takes that person away from maybe doing something else that they do normally. So we kind of worked together, and we put some money to, as you can see on your sheet, we applied some of the wages to utilities, which we do a lot of phone calls and work in the utilities that is currently not being charged. And we just thought that that would be a better way to go and help fill some of those gaps where we kind of lose out on that part-time person a day and almost a half, which takes away from our time to fill those gaps. Do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I think you pretty much summed it up. I mean, did everyone have a chance to read the memo or have any questions or things that you wanted to discuss? I mean, one thing we were pretty sure that you obviously wanted to see the impact on the budget. I know after talking to Scott, we were thinking it'd be something part of, if it is approved with the budget process, we would like a little bit of overlap, I would say, with Vicki while she's here, because she is planning on leaving at the end of the year, and it will depend on how much time she has left as to what the last day in the office is. And I know if we wait till budget time, we probably won't get that overlap. I guess we're kind of just looking for direction and answering any questions on what your thoughts are on making this a full-time position and splitting the.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
I think you guys are being really proactive, bringing this forward. I just wonder if you have a position on the alignment between this plan and what exists in our village charter today with regard to the descriptions of the positions that we are to hold, being clerk, finance director, and village treasurer. Sounds to me like the area of need isn't necessarily more financial support, it's administrative support. I'm just trying to get clarity, because the charter lineup for our employment doesn't match the reality. And I kind of want to probe and figure out kind of where that.
But I think in the chart ordinances, and I didn't look at it before the meeting, but if there's the reference to a finance director, that was done by a prior board. However, that position has never been filled. It's been kept clerk and treasurer, I think substantially due to the cost of filling the finance director by having somebody with a CPA versus what the village can afford in its current budget. So that's why that position is still there. It has not been filled. There haven't been boards that have been wanting to go in that direction, I think primarily due to cost. So with going to a deputy, in the village did used to have a deputy clerk and a deputy treasurer position, but with staffing changes and different ideas on staffing, the thought was to go to a deputy clerk treasurer position when the clerk treasurer position was split into a village clerk only and then village treasurer only, and to have that deputy clerk treasurer position and then have the administrative assistant finance position be kind of a backup to that. I think we have a different philosophy now on trying to focus more and give Kayla more support on the treasurer side by having a full-time dedicated deputy treasurer, and on the administrative permitting side, clerical side, clerk and election side, having somebody specifically dedicated, so we're not pulling a person in two different directions at a time where both might be needing that same person. If you have elections going on and you've got utility billing going on, let's say. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It helps. It helps. I'm just trying to understand kind of where that mismatch is, if it's just a case of the evolution of needs and kind of the way staffing has developed over time, because I wasn't here when previous discussions about a finance director have taken place.
I was not either. So
And we've had those in the past, and as I recall from most discussions, it was, you know, and Kelly, if I misspeak about a CPA, you tell me. But really, the background and what a CPA does is so different than the nuts and bolts that need to be done here on a daily basis. And if we need someone to do in-depth financial analysis, we work with Baird, we work with a CPA firm. On the limited number of times that we need that, we have experts that we can call on, but basically we just need to get stuff done. And so to a large extent, that's why we've gone the route that we have.
I would agree with that analysis, yeah.
I agree. Just for my clarification, would the deputy clerk role would be more of that administrative side of it? Because when I was looking at this, I was missing where we're covering that administrative piece, but that's more, given what you just said, Scott, that'd be more on the deputy clerk side, doing that administrative side, and then also then having the deputy treasurer helping with that.
Are you talking right now about our admin assistant position
no.
and how we're splitting that?
No,
or?
I'm talking
Okay.
going to this new model.
Yeah,
I was
so
kind of missing where that administrative piece was, and I was also picturing the deputy treasurer doing some of the administrative stuff, and I just wasn't clear on that, but hearing you, that's where the two roles would.
Yeah, I think you'd have some backup between the deputy treasurer backing up the deputy clerk for like counter service, but they'd each have their own unique functions in backing up the clerk and the treasurer. But we would work towards that cross-training and the redundancy so that if somebody is out, that we still have those functions that can get done.
Didn't we have these two positions previously? Because you were the deputy clerk.
Well, I was a deputy clerk treasurer, so I've been in that role, and I can speak to, it can get different at times because I maybe have to do utility payments, but also had to help with elections. So it kind of puts that, but I forgot my train of thought.
But, and I think we've been at that 29-hour position from when Kathy Memmel worked for the village many years ago. So we never got beyond that 29 hours. So the deputy clerk treasurer was the 40-hour position, and Vicky's position continued on at that 29-hour position. So the goal with what Cassie and Kayla are presenting is to get that part-time position to full-time, so there's full-time support for both the clerk and the treasurer to help with the additional tasks that have been taken on over time, regulatory issues with PSC and DNR, helping out with the DPW staff with that as well.
Yeah, the workload has increased for you guys without the additional resources.
Yeah,
I think we all
we
recognize
feel
that.
it. We feel
Yeah.
it like during our busy times. It's
You're not surprised to hear Craig say that.
no,
Well,
no, and
not only have we given more tests, but also like Scott was saying, is the compliance issues and all those things. That's what Dan has talked about in terms of why we needed a utility supervisor, because of the constant demands by the regulators to have to answer all these things. I mean, yeah, the workload's increased.
yeah, and I would say I have a ton more utility work, and that sometimes it's like I don't even get to focus on anything other than that. So that would be huge to be able to have a deputy that could focus a lot on utility stuff, especially considering we are backup for, or we basically are the admin assistants as well for DPW. So with answering all their calls and doing all their notices and things that they require, we did put in the packet the essential duties, which defines everything that each position would be. Those would be their main positions, and then we have the functions in which are cross-trained, but those aren't limited. Those are like absolute minimum. They have to be cross-trained in those, and this will also allow us to be able to cross-train both positions so that when other people are out, our deputies can back up one another or still assist us.
That actually gets at something else that I wanted to ask. It sounds like, in your estimation, adding some kind of part-time dedicated DPW admin support would not be as effective because you would not have that opportunity for cross-training and support.
And be there all the time.
Pardon?
And be there all the time. I mean, stuff happens every day, all day long.
Yeah.
It's just a question.
I mean, we've kind of absorbed pretty much all of DPW stuff, and so I feel like adding this as a full-time position, I think we kind of called it out in here. It's an extra 11 hours per week. You know what I mean? So the amount of DPW stuff that we handle, I mean, that it covers just that, you know what I mean? So especially during times like, you know, leaf collection and things like that, when you've already put this kind of stuff on their notices, but we're still getting, I don't know, 15, 20 calls a day about this kind of stuff. So
the notices aren't getting read.
the thing, you know, those utility bill inserts, you should read them. They're pretty awesome. And for the record, I like your tie. That's pretty cool.
I don't know what people are reading.
So essentially, though, we upgraded, you know, we changed the accounting software, and so has that saved you time, the efficiencies that you thought? So, I mean,
So with accounting, I used to manually have to, well, you know how long our account strings are. I'd have to manually type all those in. I'd have to manually type in the description and everything all the time just to do like my journal entries and things like that. So I have my journal entries set up now where I can change certain things and upload them so certain things go a lot quicker. I would say we've saved an entire day with payroll processing.
As long as everything goes right.
Yeah.
Just put that disclaimer in.
Utility billing, I would say the reports are amazing compared to what we ever had before. And I made that change want to say it was third quarter last year, where I changed it and we aligned all the service dates. And at that time as well, then we took it from the time of read to the time we received revenue was 2 months, and we've taken that down to 1 month now.
So I guess what I'm getting at is the software saved you time, you have additional time, and that time has been taken up by all of this.
The regulatory stuff. Oh yeah, we have a ton of stuff with DNR and with
That's so much more than you've had in the past.
Oh,
and
yeah.
to take
This is
up
all new. Yeah.
Well, that,
that
and on
much.
top of like, ever since I've started working here, I've had a list that's like, maybe someday if I want to, take an hour and do it, which never happens. I think we all have those back burner lists that we can't get to. I mean, our office needs to become more proactive so that we can maybe do some communication things, or we can get with the times. I mean, like the YouTube, that's great, and we're getting that out, but like our office is suffering. So
You're saying we
then-
should put an email together to go out to everyone.
Right, yeah. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, I feel like sometimes we're kind of stuck. We're stuck still back, let's say 90s.
Yeah.
But we want to be in the 2020. But how do we get there when we don't have the adequate staffing to do what we need to do anyways? I mean, in all reality, we could use a full-time person and keep Vicky's job. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And we would finally maybe be able to make some headway. But
Yeah, because
I
that
mean-
part-time position would be great just alone for counter and phones to have like a receptionist. But yeah, I mean, I would say on the utility side of things, the compliance and with the DNR, and with the housing market and how everything's selling and changing so quickly, we have so many more requests to do on that. What were some of the other things that we talked about? We kind of were doing a little bit of analysis with, say, dog license and operators licenses and how much time that truly takes just to process the ones we have. And just alone doing operators licenses in 22 and 23, we have 150 hours. From the process of taking it into the window and just to process one application all the way through printing it and giving it to the person is about 30 minutes. And when we do 250 to 300 of them a year, that's taking us about 150 hours alone.
And
that's just one process.
And that was calculated for the fees that we charge, so that we're charging
Oh,
the
for the
fees for
operators?
all the, yeah.
Yeah.
for those.
Any other comments or questions, Bob?
Bottom line, we're picking up 11 hours a week. Okay, it's coming at a cost of $20-some thousand a year, correct? The managers of people and of workload are making this recommendation. It'll make the team more efficient and serve the citizens better. It makes sense to me.
The number one complaint I've heard from citizens has been about communication and responses. Obviously, you don't hear all the good stuff, but if this is going to help ease the burden in some way of you guys to be able to increase communications, especially if you guys are shouldering the DPW stuff and everything, I'm 100% for it.
I guess the only other question we have, and I guess this is also something that we should maybe talk with Scott about, is making this part of budget.
Yeah, I think
Is
we've
it-
got the direction from the board, so the next step is to incorporate into the budget proposal.
But if you move forward on this between now and the end of the year, obviously we have an impact on this year's budget.
Well, that we
That's the plan,
did,
right? Or are you thinking that this would all hold off? 'Cause
well, we
Vicky's
did put
retired
it in
next year.
there.
The overlap training.
But it's
training.
But it's
Right, that's what I'm saying.
adding someone.
So the training hours at minimum would hit this year's budget.
Yeah, so we did put that in the memo, would be about $2,000 to maybe $2,500, because Vicky would be willing that if we were granted it prior to budget approval, she would phase herself out, but work with training that person. So maybe decreasing herself to 20 hours a week or 16 hours a week, and letting the other person take on those other hours, just so we do have some cross-training. And I would say our only concern with having that cross-training is because we have 4 elections next year. So we kind of have to, I guess if we wait until budget time, we wait till budget time, but then it's going to be us training and trying to manage.
I have a big
The load.
question.
Yes, sir.
Who have we, I think I know the answer to this, but can you tell me who are you looking at? This is actually Jenna's position that we're looking to split.
Yes, she's aware. She is okay with it. And
She
she
be-
has chosen what she'd like to do.
And which that would be the clerk, because I see that right now as clerk treasurer, she has the duties of running and helping with the elections. She does the planning commission, helping Scott and Cassie, but more or less Scott and her, do the planning commission and at night. Plus, she does answer the phones if the other one is not there, the part-time person.
Right.
So this is basically gonna be a good thing for everybody, it looks like, because it'll give her more time and not affecting you as much, because now you don't have to worry about what she's doing, correct? Because we're gonna be hiring a treasurer to assist you.
Correct.
Okay, I'm all for it. I think it's gonna make everything so much better for the staff and more up to date, as they say,
Hope so.
and everything that Bob said.
Yeah,
That's a good thing.
And if we can actually find someone for the position, that's
Right.
going to be your next challenge.
That's the challenge.
I've been looking for a senior accountant for well over a year,
Yeah.
so.
Looking for a job?
That, I mean,
I'm
that
not looking
was-
for a
That
job.
was our other thing, is like now having to look for someone and the timing to do that. So,
You could go back and teach and produce a me.
I could.
Yeah. So
That would be fantastic.
this is discussion and direction. It sounds like the board is all on board with the proposal that you're showing here. When would you like to, I know you said something when we're talking about budget, but when would you like to start advertising?
Well, I think we need to work on getting the next steps in terms of position descriptions and all that together, which I'm sure Cassie and Kayla probably have ready to go on my desk tomorrow morning.
Okay.
maybe tomorrow afternoon.
All right. And then I think bring that back to the board for formal approval of the positions, and then hopefully tie down hopeful dates for recruitments and what the budget impact might be more formally.
Okay. All right.
The proposed salary that you have on here, is it based on like doing other communities, what they have? I mean, is this based on kind of a reality or?
We do have, I don't know where they pulled it, but we do have salary comparables from our peer communities with our.
Okay, so it's in line with those.
From what I remember seeing, I think it is.
I think so. We kind of did it based on the the deputy clerk treasurer role, and I mean, you'd think that would be a little better because you needed more wide variety of knowledge. So we kind of did it on that, but knowing that they needed an associate degree, they couldn't get by without it. We did it a little more, right?
Yeah, a little bit more.
I'm
But
just
not-
saying, if it's gonna be competitive and tough to find a position, if we know it's comparable to others, then at least we're not fighting that necessarily uphill.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we wanted to throw something together. I don't know if you had any questions on our, the salary and benefit proposal, but, I mean, essentially in the end, it's a decreased budget to general fund, and, I mean, I took into consideration with the percentages with all the utility stuff that, will be done with those positions. So giving them what I think is a fair and accurate percentage or allocation. But in general, it should, the general fund should see a decrease in the budget.
Any other questions? If not, staff, you have your direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't know, did you need to stay for the discussion direction regarding 2024 budget review schedule? I mean, you don't have to. Scott, would you like to?
Okay, I think the schedule before you is consistent with past years in terms of dividing up by departments on different nights, so we're not trying to plod through, pick a point to stop, and then pick up at the next time, so there's kind of expectations on who's coming when. So just want to see if the board's comfortable continuing that. We've got meetings starting at 6 o'clock. At some point in the past, we went from 7 to 6 and had budget workshop at 6 and then started the regular board meeting at 7. But we can schedule these as part of the regular board meetings since we're at 6 and then go through those departments. Each department would do an overview of its budget, some basic Q&As, and then once all that's done, come back and do the deep dive starting in October.
Scott, when do you anticipate the fire protection fee discussion to take place?
One of the meetings in September.
Is everybody okay with what has been presented this evening?
Bob, I know in the last number of years, when we get to like Park and Rec, it always seems that the city's already made their budget, made a determination on it by the time we get to it, so it's almost like we don't really have a choice. What's the schedule for the city in terms of them looking at their Park and Rec budget?
Well, I can tell you, we've already approved and sent a budget to the city. Park and Rec. Their deadlines, I think, run a little bit earlier than what we do. So that has taken place already. And again, we'll be faced with the same problems when it comes to health insurance and things like that. There's unknowns, and they won't know that until later in the year. But that process has already been started, and we approved a budget already.
Any other comments or questions? So everything looks good here, Scott, thank you. Monthly approval of checks and invoices for all funds 2023. I'll look for a motion to approve all funds listed except for the library.
Motion to approve checks for all village-related funds other than the library.
Second, Rhodey.
Discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion is passed. The second one is I will look for an acknowledgement of the library funds checks and invoices for July of 2023.
Motion to acknowledge library funds, Krasovich.
Second, Gergen.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is hereby carried. Well, we ran out of time for the strategic plan update, so.
All right, you're lost, but that's fine.
Thank you, Kayla. Okay, old business strategic plan update, focus group progress.
Well, this will take 2 minutes. We've conducted all 4 of the focus groups and started compiling the feedback on those. Some things are the same as 4 years ago, some things are very different, but again, that's not unexpected. What I'm working through now is to try and take all that and provide, call it insights or whatever, in terms of just trying to make sense of all the lots of separate little comments on there. But there are some areas where there's tremendous consistency between all 4 groups, and I think that's helpful. And then there are some unusual things. So anyway, what I hope to do, and I don't know if we want to add this off cycle to the next village board meeting, unless it's a really long one, then we can defer it. But By the next meeting, I should kind of have that document ready to share with everyone. And also, I've updated the first section, the environmental scan, based on the audit results, because those were kind of blanks that had to be filled in, so that's been updated, and I added a section on infrastructure. So Scott's reviewing that to make sure everything I said is truthful and accurate.
He's fact checking.
So maybe even, I don't know, there's no deadline for Scott on that, but, you know, we could, if it's done, we can review both of those at the next meeting as well. And at that point, I think we have to decide if we want to take that next step of doing the survey to the community, or if we want to just work with what we have within the feedback sessions. And if I have time, I will try to at least get some preliminary costs of what that looks like to do that kind of a survey, because there will be costs to do that. So that's it. Questions?
And Bob?
Craig, thank you for taking a leadership role in this. It's
Yes.
great. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's been so beneficial the first time around. Hopefully it will be beneficial the second time around as well. So,
Are there any other questions or comments? Then we will move on. There are no citizens here right at this time, so we'll move right into adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
second, Roberts.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are hereby adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for this evening.